Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 2 and me reacting to the video between Ned Fulmer and Ariel Fulmer. Let's watch.
And then it was just like, oh, everything changed for me as well. I'm like, oh no, this is like I've been hurting this person that I love this whole time.
You didn't realize until then?
Well, but then there's other things you tell yourself to kind of...
All right, that's interesting. So from that reaction, she is saying, really? That's when you realized that you were harming me? And yeah, I get that. And yet, as an outsider, what he is saying is very common. And it's upsetting and it's worrisome, right? Because if he is a good person, maybe he's not, but if he is, then how do we trust anybody around us? You know, the perspective of cheaters are narcissists, or they're easy to detect, or you want to trust your gut, or this kind of thing. All that is possible, but there's a lot of infidelity that happens that it's just hard to explain in the typical ways that society will try to explain it. And therefore, there's little one can do to know as to whether or not your partner is cheating on you at all. It's hard.
Sort of compartmentalize, or I guess.
Okay, I'm going to rewind that because I like that exchange. She looks at him like, really? That's when you realized? And then he says his explanation, which I think could absolutely be true. And then she says, like, sucks for me. She's not saving him is the thing. She's not like, well, I get it, or whatever. You know, she's just like, okay, so let's ruin that.
You didn't realize until then?
Well, but then there's other things you tell yourself to kind of sort of compartmentalize, or I guess.
You know, he's referring to something, this compartmentalization. Usually what that means is that he had reasons, he had justifications, and often the justifications are, well, Ariel is this way, you know, she's a jerk face in this way, or she is neglectful of me in this way, or she is controlling, or whatever. You know, I don't know what it would be, but there are justifications. It doesn't actually justify the infidelity, but he's just giving the topic, or the topic of the topic sentence.
Interesting.
It's sort of a, it's like a addictive cycle, kind of.
All right, so in the intro, he said about make amends, which made me wonder if he is at least reading, or if not attending 12-step, or he has some experience in that. And then he says addictive, and so it sounds like maybe there's some kind of way of conceptualizing the infidelity within the addictive models. And that can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. Like when people cheat, especially in public, they will sometimes, when they're caught and they can't get away with it anymore, they will resort to saying that they had a sex addiction, or they were addicted to drama or something. And that admits what they did was wrong, but to them it releases responsibility to some extent, because there's perspective and philosophy in addictions treatment that says that you were born this way, or you have a disease, and it's more palatable to them and possibly better for PR.
I think it's like the loss of that dream that we both had. It felt like that in that time period for me too.
What happened?
All right, so she's asking, why did you do it? And I was under the impression, given that they have seemingly a good relationship, a good working relationship over the past few years, you know, co-parenting and stuff, but it could be fairly limited, and it also might not involve a lot of deep conversations. I don't know. But I thought, given that they'd gone a couple therapy and whatnot, that this had been answered, but it looks like it hasn't. Maybe he didn't know why yet. Maybe he still doesn't know why. But let's see what he says to this. I'm curious.
Well, the dream started to break apart for me, and then rather than being able to talk about it or to confront those feelings, I wanted to, I guess I was too afraid to say.
Yeah, I think I speculated about this earlier, that he either somewhat consciously or all unconsciously was falling out of love and was no longer wanting to be in a relationship with Ariel. And if he could face that, then he would have figured out a way to divorce amicably or something like that. But instead, because of the fear and the pressure that, is real, there's pressure from the outside, there's pressure from society, there's pressure from the viewership, there's pressure given that they have kids together, that kind of thing. Now, it doesn't justify cheating and lying about it repeatedly over time, but this isn't an uncommon reason as to why people will cheat. And it is upsetting. You just think, why didn't you just talk about it? Why didn't you just address it? Why? Okay, fine. Divorce, that would be tough, but why cheat? Why repeatedly cheat? Why even build up to, the decisions to build up to cheating? It's not like it just happens, right? There's a building up to it. And then why put me and this family through all of it? Not only that, but also the public nature of this whole thing. You could have just broken up with me.
I guess I was too afraid to say how I was actually feeling, and it seemed, I don't know, I chose to deal with it and deal with feelings that I was experiencing in a way that was really self-destructive and hurtful to you.
So this is what I was talking about in terms of the part of the apology, the 11 components where you talk about the reason without using it as an excuse. So this is along those lines. He could just be making this up. It could be wrong. There could be other reasons, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was the main reason. It could be a more global personality trait or tendency for him to avoid conflict or to deny his feelings or to even blame others quietly, which some people will do. Again, listen to my deep dive on passive-aggressive personality. In a nutshell, if we're raised in a way in which we can't express anger in a healthy way, which to some extent all of us are raised that way, either by our parents or by society, but if you experienced particular suppression, a demand from one's parents to suppress one's anger, then you still have all the anger. In fact, you have a lot of anger because it builds up over time without being expressed. And the only way you can express it is through passive or hidden ways. And anger is a wonderful emotion. It gives us the ability to stand up for ourselves and alert others to injustice and unfairness. So if you experience injustice and unfairness as a child, as a young adult, and you have no way of even acknowledging to yourself that it's happening, well, it's got to come out some way. And one of the ways that it frequently will come out is cheating. It's a very fucked up way of doing it. It feels like one is expressing one's anger. It feels like one is doing something for themselves for once, that they're being assertive, that they're taking control of their life in a way that they deserve to. It can be very, I'm not saying that's what he did, but there can be that element. Even for people without passive-aggressive personality traits, there can be that justification. And it's a very common pathway to infidelity. Well, we haven't had sex in 2 years. She said that she wasn't going to be one of those people who stops having sex after having kids. And yet here we are. And I've been trying to talk with her about it, but she won't talk. Or I'm not saying that's what happened, but that and a dozen other things that they focus on. I think that's what we're hearing is that avoidance of conflict and also him falling out of love and just having no way to acknowledge or talk about it. And the other aspect of this is that it's possible that there was distance developing in his marriage, either from his side or both or whatever. And that creates a vacuum of need, right? We all need companionship and love and togetherness and attachment. And that can result in a void that can be filled by someone else, right? It doesn't justify it, but it does provide an explanation. If he's going to be involved with anyone in the future, which I'm guessing he plans, if not already in a relationship with someone, then he needs to really understand what led up to that situation, because he's liable to do it again, if not infidelity, some other form of conflict avoidance.
Mm.
And it wasn't like anything you did or like we had a bad marriage. It was about me and choices that I made. And
now we have to very much remember that he knows he's being filmed. He knows at least public perception, if not the rest of his life and career, depends on how he performs in front of the camera here. So we have to very much understand that there's an incentive. We're not just watching a conversation between two people.
Just actions that I took that I'll always regret. I'll always regret how much pain I caused you and other people.
So just using this as a jumping off point, when you are apologizing, it is good to do what he's doing right now, which is to emphasize that you are suffering yourself, not as a way of getting out from underneath the transgression, but as a way of conveying to the person that you betrayed that you understand what you did and you understand the full weight of it. Now, she can believe it or not. She could let it into her heart or not. She can make her own choices about that. But you also deserve to be able to recognize that to yourself, because it's probably happening. And two, it will help you moving forward, because if you can really explore that feeling, it will kick in the next time you start to go down that slippery slope. Also, in all likelihood, particularly around infidelity, a common theme among cheaters is that they will deny their feelings. And to continue to deny one's feelings moving forward by not acknowledging the pain and the guilt and the vicarious pain that you feel and the remorse that you feel, to deny that would be to set you up for failure in the future.
I'm deeply, deeply sorry. And I'll spend my whole rest of my life trying to make amends to you and to, show up.
So this is just because I'm a couple therapist. I have instincts that kick in. So I'm not there, a couple therapist, and I only am watching a video, so I can't really tell. But I'll tell you that as an instinct, I would want to capitalize on this moment and ask him to go into more detail about what he's talking about regarding what led up to the infidelity, what he was going through, without making excuses about it. Because when she asked essentially the question, why did you do that? Why'd you do it? It sounded like she really didn't know. He gave a very topic sentence, but there's a lot more detail there that could help. I don't know if it would help her. And there's a balance between going into too much detail where you're just re-traumatizing the victim, but having him do that. Now, there's a possibility that he doesn't know. It wouldn't be strange for someone 3 years after infidelity to be barely aware of their personality problem that led to the infidelity to begin with. It sounds like he understands it a little bit, which is a good sign, but these things take time and a lot of therapy with a good therapist.
Differently, to lead a life of integrity and to be a father that our children can learn from. Because you did nothing to deserve this, and I completely, suddenly, violently shattered our marriage, our relationship, and like everything you knew. And
Like, one of the things that I would be trying to get at would be something along the lines, something in the category where he is in the moment self-reflecting on his state of mind at the time. Something like, yeah, at the time I was really stressed out at work. This is just a random role play. I have no idea if this would be, there's a lot of different possibilities, but if I were just to take a guess as to what someone like him would say if they were aware, that's the other thing, they have to be aware, but I might say something like, yeah, at the time I was really stressed out with work, not as an excuse, but I just felt like I was constantly on the treadmill of content making, and I was a part of this team, and there were three other people and a whole team of employees who worked for the YouTube channel and all this stuff. And I felt like I couldn't let anyone down, and there were the fans, and I just felt like I was slowly losing control of my life. I liked doing the job. If you asked me at the time, I was happy, but looking back, I was working way too much. I missed hanging out with you and the kids, and I just was, really stressed out. So that's one. Another thing that was happening for me was, given my issues growing up and conflict avoidance, when you and I would run into a problem, I wouldn't say anything, and I would stuff it, and I would just sweep it under the rug, or I would say, we have a wonderful relationship. And looking back, because I was the married guy on the YouTube channel, or I keep referring to it as a YouTube channel. I don't know if that was their primary platform, but just go with me on that. That on the Try Guys, I was the relationship guy, and so I had a hard time even accepting that we would have problems. And I kept stuffing and sweeping under the rug, and I was, looking back, slowly starting to resent you in ways that make no sense looking back. I mean, I could have said something, you're a good listener, you're nice, but I just, kept building this whole thing up. I think I was following in my parents' footsteps in this way. And I started drinking more than usual. I found myself being attracted to this other woman, and I didn't know what to do with it, and it was just a really slow process. When I saw you, even as the affair started, I still loved you, but I would put it aside, I guess, in my mind. Like, I would just kind of go into denial that it was happening, and even while it was happening, I thought it'll be over soon, and no one will know, and everything will be fine, and I was lost. And if I would have stopped to think about it, or if I had a therapist at the time or something, it was obvious that I was in over my head on so many different levels. I mean, what was I thinking about? I don't understand what I was thinking. I'm a public figure. I knew that people could see us in public at times. I kissed her in public, and people took a picture, and that was what was on the. I mean, what was I thinking? And to tell you the truth, the affair, I mean, she's a wonderful person, but I don't even know if we were good for each other. I was just lost. And I guess it kind of felt like this freedom or something. Okay, so end of role play. I don't know if that would fit him. Probably doesn't in a lot of ways, but something like that. As a therapist, I'd be trying to get to that, not only for him to begin to heal and figure this out and process and gain some self-awareness and gain some validation of sorts, right? You're not validating the infidelity, but validating that he was suffering. And also, she could benefit by hearing all that, whatever that is, because then she would say, oh, okay, what? Why would you cheat? But at least I have some ideas to what you were going through and how you got to that point. I have some nitpicks on that story about how we were distant, because I didn't feel distant from you, or whatever. She could have her she could add to the story or something. But there can be a lot of healing for her and for him and for them and maybe the audience if he could get to that. Now, there's a good chance that either by talking about that, it would be talking about too much. Like he might even have a thing where he's like, I'm not going to talk about that other woman because I don't want to harm her in this process as well. She's not here, or even legally I can't, or I don't want to get into it with, I just want to stick to this. So maybe he feels like he can't talk about that publicly. But I don't know, the way he talks, it sounds like he has some more awareness that he's not talking about, but maybe not a lot. Because I'm guessing if he had a lot, these kinds of things there's a chance, who knows, but he could be in therapy for the rest of his life and get 60% down the road. These kinds of problems are tenacious.
Laughter. In respect and in honesty.
Me too.
Thank you again to Ariel.
Okay, so the talk was about an hour long between the two of them. And I will say that it was, a good conversation. There are hints that authenticity is an issue for him, and she said a few things along those lines. The other thing they talked about was, for her, she doesn't want to make content anymore because she says, I think she said she's almost 40 or she just turned 40. And she knows from experience that there's a beauty standard for influencers and YouTubers that is destructive. And she doesn't want to engage with that, especially as she gets older. She wants to create on her own and not have to film it. And the vibe made it seem like she's lived for a long time with the expectation that everything will be filmed. Now, that could have been because of her, it could have been because of him, it could have been both, I don't know. But she seemed very much ready to never make content ever again. He is talking about starting a podcast, and he says that it will be him asking questions. She was even encouraging him to not just ask questions, but also be authentic and tell his own stories, right? Not just be a listener, but be authentic. So, another tick in the column that her observation of him might be, I think part of the problem with you is that you don't acknowledge who you are and you don't value authenticity, or you don't think you deserve. She even said something along those lines of, you don't think you're interesting. I mean, it was just a little moment. And there's a possibility that even before he was a content provider, that he has a hard time checking in with his needs.
Thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, your directness. This truly meant a lot to me, and thank you for watching. Next week, I'm excited to not be the subject of the episode. I'll be having a conversation with Lara Love Harden.
Okay, so this is the launch, I guess, of this YouTube channel. Well, that does it for that episode. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And be at least kind to each other, please, because we all deserve that. We really do. We deserve to take care of ourselves. We deserve to take care of others. We deserve to all be taking care of each other.